Good evening, televiewers. You're welcome to today's edition of Prime R on my Media Prime this Wednesday, June the 22nd of 2022. We are going to be looking at decentralization as well as a federation as a form of a system of governance for Cameroon, looking at which one is best to deliver. At least the country has been going through what is described as unitary decentralized form of state. We're going to be looking at how it can work for the nation, but we also are noting that there are many persons who think that a federal system of government would serve Cameroon better. So we are going to be looking at unitary decentralization as a form of government as well as a federation. Also actually focusing on whether good governance is not key to deliver. Is it because it's unitary decentralized system that Cameroonians are not very satisfied? Is it because it is this form of system that is being implemented in Cameroon that we are having a separatist movement threatening the unity of the country, knowing fully well that across the board in Nigeria we have a federal system of government, yet we also have tendencies of persons wanting to separate from the nation called Nigeria. Which one is the best? Is it not the fact that good governance could play a key to actually meeting the needs of Cameroonians as well as of other Africans that may be looking for the magic one as far as the system of governance is concerned that will aptly meet the expectations of their respective nations? This day we are hosting two persons who would be talking from different camps, from the unitary decentralized perspective as well as the federal perspective. We have the director of the CPDM Academy as well as the board. He also is the board chair of the Douala General Hospital. Professor Elvis Ngole. Ngole is going to be our guest for tonight. Good evening, Professor. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Leo. It's a great pleasure to be back on and share this platform with our friends and compatriots who are in the diaspora or those who are within the country. We're all patriots and we love our country and would like to give our best in terms of our intellectual inputs to ensure that our country is the best place on earth, and why not, so that we can be as competitive as any country in the world.
Okay. We're also in the company of Professor Ben Akih, who is a staunch Federalist. He has written a book on federation. He has also been very active since the advent of the Anglophone crisis, pushing for a federation. He's working very closely with other federalists that Cameroon can actually boast of. Professor Ben, we are glad to have you this evening for this edition of Prime R.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leo, for your invitation once more. And I just want to say thank you also to Professor Ngole, who has made time available for this kind of discussion, because this is the only way that we can secure the welfare of our beloved country. Because Cameroon is our country, and we should be all looking at how we can use the argument, the power of argument to put forward the best way we can steer this for ourselves and for future generations.
Good evening to you, Lambert Kevin, watching from Emia, Yaoundé, and to you, Gonza Wilson, Nongo Robinson. We hope that on social media you guys are also going to be contributing. But I'll start with you, Professor Elvis Ngole. How much has decentralization helped Cameroon so far meet its vision or objectives, and how close has power been brought to the people, to the doorsteps of the people, respective regions and divisions, using this form of government or this system of government? Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Leo, thank you for raising that question. You know, a people in any society has the form of government or the type of government that they decide. They decide through any medium, either through elections, through a referendum, or through some other form of consultations to be what they want. And in the case of Cameroon, as you know, we started off as a country, as a federal form of government from 1961 to 1972. And we all, and history records, that the country functioned as a federal system, federal state from 61 to 72. And we all know for those 11 years how the system functioned. There were some weaknesses, there were some difficulties, but we all experienced it. And after 11 years, a referendum took place. And in that referendum, the people decided that on May 20th, 1972, they will move to a unitary state, which was in a centralized form, I have to say, from 72. And with the beginning of the 1990s, especially beginning with the tripartite conference in 1991, it was decided that unitary state in a centralized form was not working very well, and that it needed to be decentralized, and that some others thought instead of maintaining the unitary state at that time, that they should go for a federation. And during the tripartite, there was a lot of debate, and in those debates, there were all kinds of viewpoints. And in 1996, a new constitution came up, and in that new constitution, the unitary state was maintained, but it changed its mode and its form of functioning from a centralized unitary state to a decentralized unitary state. But we all know from experience that while that decentralization was better than centralization, the speed, the rate, the rhythm was slow, and after with the advent of the crisis or the conflict in the northwest and southwest from 2016, it was necessary that decentralization should be accelerated in order to give full meaning to it. And so the head of state instructed that it should be accelerated, that decentralization should be accelerated. And in the major national dialogue in 2019, that was recommended, and it has been accelerated. And now we have decentralized 10 regions that are working, which were not there before 2009. Surely they have their challenges, and they also have their anxieties. We are all there to encourage that decentralization should work in the best way it can, even though others still believe that a federation would be better, or that we ought to have a federation rather than a decentralized unitary state. Well, this debate is always there, but my view and my take is that we are, as patriots and as citizens who believe in the law and respect the law, and as Democrats, and we know that there's no democracy without the law and without citizens that are law-abiding. We believe that whatever it takes to make our republic and the sovereign state of Cameroon work better, it will work, and we have to encourage that it works according to the law, according to the constitution, and according to the wishes of our people, either through a formal election or through some kind of referendum. There is no issue. As far as we are concerned, our people deserve the best form of government on earth, as far as I know, because we all lived through that when we were all students in the United States, in the federal, which function on the basis of a federation. And we think that whatever form of government Cameroonians wish to have, let it be by consent, let it be by law, let it be by constitution. And from what, as far as I know as of now, the constitution in place is a constitution that provides for a unitary, decentralized state. Now, if the people wish to change that, of course, it will be based on either an election or a referendum, or if the constitution, there's a constitutional amendment. Whatever be the case, we are all for a system of government whereby or in which the citizens enjoy not only freedom, but they enjoy the right to choose their leaders at whatever level, and that they're able to use the choices and the preferences they've made to get the leaders that they have chosen, so that these leaders can make decisions that are for the interest of the people.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Prof. Ben, you are a federalist. We understand that neighboring Nigeria is also being governed using the federal structure or system, yet we still have similar problems like what we have in Cameroon. What is the guarantee that a federal structure in Cameroon would work?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Leo. I think the question you're putting it is slightly distort history. Cameroon is a federation, and that federation has been suspended by the government in place since 1972. We must get that historical fact clear. Professor Ngole is a political theorist. We can talk about that. We can talk about the centrality of the Constitution in the life of a nation. And if we follow this idea, we will realize that the 1972 referendum was not in accordance with the spirit of the contract of reunification, the basis of which was a federation. And now we can talk about that constitution. It was not perfect, but it was perfectible. And the perfection of that constitution was not to go towards the unitary state. The imperfection of that federal constitution from 1961 to 1972 was precisely the fact that the federal government had taken almost all the powers and had too much control. So the solution to the problem, some of the problems experienced between 1961 and 1972, was not to go towards a constitutional coup d'etat, which is what we, the Federalists, I first need to put our position of the Federalists. There are two arguments we have. One is that Cameroon is a federation. It is currently operating illegally under the unitary state. I know Professor Ngole and the CPDM would like to say that is not the way to phrase it, but as a federalist, in that sense, that's the only way I can phrase it. The second is that if we understand that the universal values, principles, they say that human beings are free, human beings are sociable, human beings want to be creative in bringing change to the environment. We will soon realize that the government of the people, for the people, and by the people is the best way to do it. And once we agree that, we will see that federalism is that form of government that brings you closest to that. So there are two arguments. One is that historically, Cameroon is a federation. It is time for us to correct that, that distortion that the unitary state has brought. And precisely because of that distortion, we now have another violation of the Constitution that is being attempted, namely to separate Cameroon. According to our contract of reunification, separation is not constitutional, but also the unitary state is not constitutional. So the question now is, how do we get to the federation? So the question is not whether federation can solve all our problems. We believe that federation can solve that problem, as long as we stay within the context of constitutional rule. So if we are talking about that, then we should be saying that Yes, Cameroon experienced a federal system of government from 1961 to 1972. It was not perfect, and most of the problems with that federalism was because it was overly centralized, and the solution was not further centralization using the instruments of a referendum. Now, Professor Ngole has mentioned that referendum, but precisely that Article 2 of that constitution was saying that the sovereignty belongs to the people of Cameroon. They can exercise that sovereignty through elected representative or through a referendum, but no part of the country and no individual has the right to arrogate to themselves the sovereignty of Cameroon and act on behalf of the people. We can make the argument that from 1965 to 1992, the Cameroonians have never had an election where their opinion counts. You can see that by seeing the results of all those elections 100%. I'm asking Professor Ngole, as a political theorist, look at the history of the world. Where do you have elections where people are free to express themselves? Even within a human being, whether you want to decide to build a house, to marry a wife, or to do this, do you get up to 100%? How is it that Cameroon in 1965 had 100% for the president, 100% in 1970, 100%, or nearly 99.98% for the referendum? And the other aspect of that referendum is that the minority, the virtue of a good constitutional democracy is that it protects the minority. And it is precisely that which our forefathers achieved in the federal constitution. It was said that to amend the federal constitution, you needed a majority in West Cameroon, majority in East Cameroon in the House of Assembly. But throwing the question to the referendum meant that you just needed majority to confirm that. Take away the electoral fraud of 1972. We now have a situation where even if all the Anglophones, all the West Cameroonians voted against the change from federalism to unitary state, that resolution would still have passed. That question would still have passed. That is not the way a constitutional democracy operates. So the good question is, how do we solve the problem? Professor Ngole said, we're open to discussion, we're open to talking about this. He is associated with the CPDM Academy. He is deep in the CPDM party. So I am hoping that from our conversation now, he is moved to tell his party to change their platform to a Federalist party so that the upcoming elections give us the possibility to resolve this question once and for all. Is the party of CPDM either acknowledging the fact that Cameroon is a federation or acknowledging the fact that we have problems today? Is the CPDM willing to hold a Congress tomorrow and declare that we are now a Federalist party? Because that's where the country is going.
I actually asked you, Professor Ben, to tell us whether, to give us guarantees that a federation would deliver for Cameroon better. You wanted us to plant what in Francophone, in French we'll say you wanted to do what they call planter le décor. But I'm not sure Professor Elvis Ngole buys what you are saying 100%, describing what happened in 1972 as illegal, and that the unitary decentralized form of government that we have today is illegal. Professor, can we correct some of the things Professor Ben said earlier on?
Yes, I'm very glad that you give me the opportunity to discuss this with Dr. Ben Akih, and I appreciate the fact that we are both patriotic citizens of Cameroon, and we are proud to be such. And I have to congratulate him on the book he wrote on federations. But I think that I have to correct certain points he has made which, from my own standpoint, I consider to be misstatements. The first point I would like to raise is that he has used the phrase political theories more than once. I have to tell him that I did political science, and political theory is only one aspect of political science. You know, there are other aspects of political science, public administration, international relations, and political ideology, and so forth and so on. You should rather refer to me as a political scientist and not a political theorist, because a political theory is simply one component, one aspect of political science, and I'm very proud to be one. The other statement I have to discuss here is that Dr. Ben Akih has made statements here which I think from the standpoint of political science are not they're not tenable. One is, the first point he has made is that that Cameroon is a federation, and that the 1972 referendum was not in conformity with the constitution. I think that it will be. I mean, we are both Cameroonian patriots, and we believe that we have a moral duty to educate our people. I think part of the reason why we have this conflict in the Northwest and Southwest for the last 5 or 6 years is because there is a lot of confusion out there, and our people deserve to be given what is scientifically correct. And what is happening in Cameroon is nothing specific to Cameroon. It has happened to other countries. It is not today the world began. Political construction, statecrafting has been going on for centuries. And we are simply being part of history or part of civilization in the construction of states or political systems. So we should not make as if we're doing something which others have not done before. From the standpoint of fact, from the standpoint of history, it is not possible, it's not correct for someone to say that Cameroon is a federation. A federation ceased to exist in as from 20th of May 1972. And that is constitutional because the constitution enabled that the federation should be replaced in 72 with a unitary system. And that act of moving from a federation to a unitary system was based on, again, the constitution, because it was a referendum. Now, if anyone refers to that referendum, as Dr. Akih says, as an electoral fraud or a constitutional coup, I think that what they are saying is that the Cameroonian people who took part voluntarily, by the way, and in their sovereignty, in that peaceful referendum, that they were wrong. I don't think we should. Anyone who denies, who refuses, who rejects the referendum of 1972, not everybody has to agree when there's a referendum or when there's any election. But the fact that you disagree does not make the referendum illegal or does not make the referendum or the election a coup. You are free to disagree. That is your right under the Constitution. But the referendum took place. It was an election. It was sovereign. It was a sovereign act, and it was backed by the Constitution. Therefore, there is no illegality. There is no unconstitutionality, and it cannot be called a fraud. Because if you do that, what you are saying is that the Cameroonian people in 1972 were frauds or are frauds. And I don't think that our citizens are frauds. Our people carried out a sovereign act on May 20, 1972 to put an end to the federation, and the federation ended, and to begin a new form of state, which is known and referred to as a unitary system. Except that that unitary system from 1972 to 1996 was
okay, we have technical issues. Prof. Ben, but now you were trying to set the foundation on which we are actually operating. Eli, once Professor Ngole is back, let him continue with what he was saying. But let's get back to Prof. Ben out there. You were setting the stage of what is actually happening today. But what is the guarantee that a federal structure or system in Cameroon would work the magic?
So to come back, I hope that the professor will be able to come back and then we can carry on the discussion. Of course, the part he represents is going to defend the fact that there was a legal process to end the federation for whatever reasons that we can examine. But we also have our position to say that that was a constitutional violation, and all we need to do is to take it to the Cameroonian people with very clear guidance on how they should elect the government going forward to resolve that problem. So what is the guarantee that a federal system of government is going to work? Simply, the federal system of government, going back to respecting the idea of a constitution, is going to help to instill in the minds of Cameroonians that we have a system of checks and balances, we have a system of government where the people elect their representatives and these representatives are accountable to them, right? And if you have, right at the moment, the president is in charge of everything. The whole system of plein pouvoir, the whole system of high instructions, that is what is crippling the government. The federal system brings into operation many more actors at the local level with the possibility of overseeing the actions of what the other people are doing and creating opportunities for people to interact, federal government with state government with local government, and all of these things are anchored in a constitution. This constitution, because federalism immediately awakens the people to the fact that the country is held together by a constitution. The country is not held together by an individual. Once you begin to focus on the principles that govern a country, you're more likely to achieve efficiency in your work. And really, that is what is going to give us the guarantee. Now, people might say there are problems in Nigeria. Nigeria is a very big country. And if Nigeria were not a federation, it would be a worse situation right now. So we have to bear this in mind as we are making the argument, asking about the merits or the demerits of a federation. The fact is simply there that, first of all, by drawing from the historical foundation that Cameroon was put together as a federation, and drawing from the idea that as far as constitutional government is concerned, federalism is that kind of government, a system of government that allows people to appreciate that we are held together by laws and principles. The rule of law holds us together, not the particular charisma of one person who might be active, might not be active, might know what is going on left and right. So we can agree that right now, even in the decentralized unitary state, everything depends on the president, who is also the chairman of the ruling party. And right now, that president is not able to carry out his duties effectively. So that is where you cannot just say, is it good governance or not? Because we will say that good governance is possible where there is constitutional rule and where there is federalism. And based on that, we can already predict that if Cameroon were to become a federation, grounded in principles and allowing the people to contribute to the decisions that ultimately ground the state, then we can say that we can bet on the fact that that federation is going to be successful. I think this is really what we are trying to achieve by talking about a federal system of government, and we should not be deceived by whatever challenges Nigeria has. Nigeria also has a problem with secession. Why is it that the secession or the separation in Biafra is not as dangerous as the one in Cameroon? For the simple fact that there is federal system of government, right? The people in Biafra, in the different states of Biafra who are complaining, they also see that their own governors are responsible for the challenges that they have. Nigeria would not have survived if it were not a federation. And still, as it is, it has many advantages over a centralized unitary state. So I'm not sure if...
The issue of elected officials that are going to be accountable to the people. In the case of a federation, we have elected officials in Cameroon today. What is going to be the difference? Is it because they are going to be elected under a federal structure that suddenly they will become accountable because these are still Cameroonians that are going to be running the affairs of their respective regions?
Well, the fact is that if they are elected, we can say we have some elected officials, but the critical officials who are responsible for that are not elected. The governor is not elected today. The SDO and the divisional officer, these are not elected people. In some places, they talk about government delegates. Now, what is the difference between a governor of a state who is elected and a governor who is appointed? Here, you're talking really about the state. We're talking about education. Because if we go to a federation, such services as education, health, right? All of this will become responsibility of the state until you go up to university level. Maybe you might want to share the responsibility of university with a centralized government. What does that mean? That means that it is the state that elects a governor, and that governor has to have answers to the questions about the lack of schools, lack of quality hospitals, right? So these governors have to be able to respond to these problems, come with a program, and be elected on that. So we can see even at that level of elected officials, these governors who are appointed today would be elected by the people. And still within the decentralized unitary state, we talked about this in your show here a while back, where the question was that you are in Limbe, you want to elect a mayor, and you're waiting for instructions from Yaoundé, from the chairman of the party and the secretary general of the party, the ruling CPDM party. So that shows that where this competition, party competition, is not present, and where the unitary state, as long as you have the element of the unitary state at the background, you are always going to have some dependency, such that even those who are elected, they're elected based on the short list of one individual and not the people themselves. So okay, that is where the challenge really is.
I don't know whether Professor Elvis Ngole is back. Prof, are you there? Okay, Prof has issues with connections. I will continue with you. Ben, out there in the US, you were talking about the issue of accountability, and I've asked whether those elected, what is going to be that formula that would ensure that elected officials within a federal structure actually render account to the local population. But I want us to look away from that. Professor Ben, what if these guys are elected and corruption is not checked? Will they deliver?
Corruption is a factor in every society. Corruption is a factor. But that corruption can be used even to drive change within the country. If you have a true federal system, of government, and you have competitive and transparent elections, so what you end up doing is that people can be corrupt, but they are at the local level and they can be voted in and out. Now, if the governor is corrupt, you have nothing to do about that. You can only complain to the one person who is in charge of everything. But suppose the governor is elected, and suppose that governor is corrupt. That governor will be elected for a term of 5 years. Maybe they carry out their corruption in their first year. Maybe there's an investigation in the second year, in the third year, and fourth year. Those those people will likely not be re-elected, because there, journalists like yourself will have more access to information. One of the values of the federal system of government from 1961 to 1972 was that in West Cameroon, there was relative freedom, and there were civil liberties such that journalists could interview government officials. You can go to the governor and you can have an interview. So I'm asking you, how many times have you gone to interview the governor of Southwest, of Northwest, to ask questions, critical questions, and hold them accountable for the things that are happening in their region? Right now, they are appointed. They don't owe their power to the people. But in a case where they owe their power to the people, they are more willing to go beg journalists, say, please come and interview me. And in that process, that accountability brings together transparency, and then you have re-elections going on. And to be re-elected, that governor will have to come and say, you elected me, this is what I did with the money, this is what I did, this is what I did. And that's why I'm asking you to give me another term of office so that I can be re-elected. I can continue the work that I'm doing. So necessarily, we are spending too much time talking about corruption. We have to first of all examine what is the mechanism of corruption. Why is it that corruption is flourishing in Cameroon today? Corruption flourishes because there is predictable one-party system with the same people in charge of government at all levels. People complaining about it. You look at the number of governors, you look at the number of divisional officers, senior divisional officers, you look at their region of origin. They're almost predictable. And you have no assurance that if you complain about the corruption you see here, they will not turn around and punish you for complaining and allowing the person who is corrupt to go free with that. That is what is happening today. You have a predictable system with no presidential term limit that believes that at all times the president will be re-elected, then the system will continue to be in place, we will be in charge, we will make a combination between the state institution and the ruling party. We will treat it as one thing, and once you do that, you just need to have a godfather in the government. If you have a godfather in the government at a higher level, you can be corrupt at the lower level, because the worst somebody can do to you is to report you at a higher level, and that report will not be treated. But that system changes within a federal system of government that has at different levels, that has in some questions, the federated state is competent, completely competent to make a decision without any interference from the federal government.
We are actually very sorry. I don't know whether Professor Elvis Ngole is back. Is he there, please? Prof, it's not a back connection problem. I want our televiewers to understand that this panel was consisted of Professor Elvis Ngole and Ben Akih out there in the United States, talking from the viewpoints of a unitary decentralized system or form of government, as well as the proposed federation by the Federalist movements. But now, Ben, how do we get a federal system functional in Cameroon? It cannot be declared. It has to go through a constitutional process, legitimate process. How do we get that? What are you guys doing? Are you working with political parties on ground, like the Social Democratic Front that is saying that they will go for a federal form of government, the CRM, I'm sure CPP of Kawala, and a host of others? How do you intend actually getting this form of government that is existing overturned?
Well, I'm glad you're talking about the mechanism how we return, because we started with the argument where I say Cameroon is a federation, is now suspended as a unitary state. We can disagree or agree with that, but the reality is that we need to come back to a federal system of government and resolve the problems in Cameroon. So I'm glad to say that I am a part of the coalition of Cameroon Federalist and Federalist groups and activists. Dr. Munzu is active there. A host of other people are active, and we are working to make sure that federalism is the key question in the politics of Cameroon going forward. Because we know that separation cannot work, and as much as people want to give us some hope about the unitary state in a decentralized form, we know that it is unlikely going to address the key question that drive the conflict in West Cameroon, the key problem that the people have. So in addition to that understanding, we see that the political field is beginning to understand. We are trying to make our message accessible to all Cameroonians. They understand the historical injustice towards the people of West Cameroon. They need to understand the advantages that a federation brings. They need to understand that a federation is not an indirect path to separation, because federation is grounded on the respect of the Constitution, and the Constitution of Cameroon is indeed, from our reunification, against separation and also against the unitary state. That's the point that we're first of all making. If we get many Cameroonians to understand that in West Cameroon and in East Cameroon, and we believe that we are already achieving that, if we get them to understand that, then the political discourse in Cameroon becomes centered on federalism. In fact, that's what we're beginning to see now. Some polls have been taken to show that in East Cameroon, you even have up to 60% of the people in support of federation. So how do we use these ideas to come to realize the federal system of government? We know that there is a political transition that is coming up. And we were talking here with Professor Ngole. He's in the CPDM, and we hope that the CPDM understands that our activism is helping Cameroonians to understand that federalism is the way forward. Many opposition parties now understand that we must go towards a federal system of government if we want to get a handle of the problems that are facing Cameroon. So if we look at parties such as the SDF, of course, historically, they have been advocating for federalism. You've mentioned CPP, and Mr. Kamto's CRM is also in support of federalism. Cabral Liby's party, PCRN, is also in support of federalism. So we are almost there. We just need to articulate federalism in West Cameroon and in East Cameroon as the future of Cameroon. And if federalism is the future of Cameroon in the hearts of the people of Cameroon, and we defend our elections, we register to vote, and we begin to articulate the politics of transition to be the politics of a constitutional reform towards a federal system of government, if we get to that level, and we're getting there, if we get to that level, then the question for people like Professor Ngole would be, is the CPDM the party of the future, or is it a party of history? If the CPDM realizes where the political atmosphere is, I think the first victory for Federalists will be to see that the CPDM party organizes a Congress and recognizes that the Cameroon people want a federation. Our party is now also supporting federation. Our presidential candidate we are going to put forward is going to be for federation. But if they don't do that, because they feel that they have a chance to win in the next coming presidential election, they feel that they have a chance. It is left for us Federalist activists to make it impossible going forward for a party that is strongly rooted in the unitary state in whatever form, a party that is opposed to federation. It is up to us Federalists, through our activism, to make it impossible for that party to win the presidential election. Now, I'm not talking about parliament, because mostly the parliament in Cameroon is dictated by who is president. So our target really is to make sure that a presidential candidate who does not promise that vote for me and I will carry out a constitutional conference, constitutional consultation with the aim of returning the country to a federal system of government. If in the course of all this, it is impossible to establish it. If the CPDM cannot do so, it should be clear that they will not be able to win a presidential election. So we don't have the mechanism. We are not in government, but we have the activism to talk to the people of Cameroon and say, these are our problems, these are the solutions we see, and this is how you get to that solution. A party should not be elected that is not committed to a return to federal.
Okay, is Prof. Ngole back, please? We still have connection problems getting through to Professor Elvis Ngole, who was coming in through Skype from Ewane, the nation's capital. I will stay with you, Prof. Ben. Now, I don't know, you people are working as activists, Federalist activists. I know you belong to that move. Dr. Simon Munzu, persons like Richard Richard, who was recently appointed into SDF's shadow cabinet. But are you engaging the respective political parties already, or you just acting as activists out there?
Mr. Leo, we want to make sure that we are acting as a civil society. The coalition of Cameroon Federalists and activists, they will have a formal position. We will be making this clear. But as for my platform, you know, first of all, I'm involved with English Cameroon for United Cameroon, and that's how we got together to contribute to make the coalition of Cameroon Federalists and activists, Federalist groups and activists. So yes, Mr. Ndifo is part of the working group of that coalition, and he is with the SDF party. And you may also know Mr. Fabrice Lenard is also with us in that coalition, and he is with the PAP party. With the PAP, and PAP is also a Federalist party. So yes, there are some politicians who are Federalist and who are still active with their parties. But this is the point that the platform I belong to, English Cameroon for United Cameroon, our message is that we want federalism to be the key election issue, especially at the presidential election. We need to know how Cameroon functions. Cameroon functions through the presidency, and most often the presidency dictates the majority in parliament. So the aim must always be the presidency. And in that picture, as much as we have people from other parties, we are not aligning with any particular party. Our message is simple. Our message is that the future of Cameroon is federalism. The future of Cameroon is Cameroon as a federation. If that message is clear and it resonates with the people, and we carry out opinion polls to show that this is what the people support in East Cameroon and in West Cameroon, our first victory is to have all the parties, the major parties in Cameroon, that can put forward a presidential candidate. Our first victory would be to get all these parties to declare that they are in support of federalism. That will be the first stage. The next step will be, now let's look at what is in your federation. How do you think that federation should work? Are you willing to listen to Cameroonians on the content of that federation, on the structure of that federation? Are you willing to listen to them, right? So that is where we are getting to. And we are just about 3.5 years away from 2025 when the next presidential election takes place, if it does not take place earlier. So the point is that, yes, we are putting out our message, addressing political parties. We will continue to address them in a more formal way. And my advice, this is not yet the position of the CCFGA, my advice is that Anglophones and Francophones, especially Anglophones, they need to get registered to vote. It's only when we get 2 million 2 million registered voters who are willing to support somebody become president, we will have our voice very strongly heard, not only by the politicians, but also in East Cameroon. Because if we have 2 million registered voters who are willing to vote on the single issue of returning to federalism, that will influence the way people think about voting in East Cameroon. Yes, SDF is a federalist party, but I'm not going to say, let us go out and say we are supporting SDF now. We support all parties that are fighting for federalism. But only very close to the election, first, we'll make it clear, we should make it clear, we cannot vote, we cannot promote, we cannot encourage the people of West Cameroon who want peace and justice. We cannot encourage these people to vote for a party that has not officially changed the manifesto of that party to say that they support a federal system of government. If they have the opportunity to implement it, they will implement it. That's what we are trying to get at. And right now, as you understand, Leo, the challenge really is that there might be some parties, the Celestine Germany and a few others, but they are minor parties in the perspective of presidential politics. The real issue is the CPDM party willing to change its platform to Federalist party. If they are not, then of course it's easy for me to say that I'm not campaigning for any particular party. Right.
Okay. Prof, now you are talking about a federation, and you cited the parties like the PAP, the Social Democratic Front, the CRM of Professor Maurice Kamto, who was on a live program on My Media Prime last Saturday. You understand the type of federation he's talking about, and also what the SDF stands for, and possibly the PAP. What is the form of and you also understand Cabral Libi when he says of communal federation. What is the best federation, form of federation for Cameroon that would take into account the specificities of the different ethnicities that exist in Cameroon?
The best federation is the one whose constitution is drafted with maximum input from the people. Okay. Maximum input in a constitutional conference. I'm going to put out my idea. We're working on that. We will put out more ideas on this issue. But really, to answer your question, is that we need to change the way constitutions are drafted in Cameroon. The constitution, because when you put in the constitution, we the people of Cameroon, you should say that with confidence. You should say that this constitution was put together, taking into consideration all the different ideas that people have. Now, ordinary people might say, yes, I want a good country that functions. Put out people to talk about the constitution. We should be able to talk about what we want to see in the constitution, what we don't want to see in the constitution. We want to see presidential term limit. We want to see the structures of the federation. Should it go back to West Cameroon, East Cameroon, and should East Cameroon break up? Because in my book, these are some of the things I talk about. We first need to go back to East Cameroon and West Cameroon, and each of these two states now have to decide within those states whether they want to break up the units into smaller units or they want to stay like that. And so you might end up seeing that West Cameroon wants to stay as West Cameroon, but East Cameroon wants to break up into 3 or 4 states, or you might have a solution where people say, let's have 10 states. So this is one of the questions that we think that no one person should be answering it for the people. The best you can say is to give your advice and allow the people to come to a conclusion on that.
Okay. Now, so for now, there is no clear-cut form of government that you want to see instituted in Cameroon.
I have my preference. I've explained the disadvantages and the advantages of maybe returning to a 10 state, but they are very critical ideas. They are very critical articles. I would like to see there. I've explained that the universities should be controlled by the people. We should not even have gendarmes in West Cameroon. These are some of the things that I would like to see. And all governors should be elected, right? So we should not go back to the West Cameroon structure where you had a prime minister. We should have a very clear state executive in the name of a governor, and that governor should be elected, pretty much like the Nigerian system or the American system. So to say that it is a federation, we are already on the path of answering that question. That means we say that there are going to be certain powers which will be powers reserved for the federal government, and there are going to be certain powers which are going to be reserved for the state. There are going to be certain powers which the state and the federal government will share, and the structure of their sharing will be controlled in such a way that if they have an argument, an independent judiciary should be able to settle it.
Credit got finished. I'm trying to add some credit.
Yeah, Prof. Can you come on through phone, please?
Okay, how do I do that now?
No, you're on air already.
Okay.
Yes, you are developing something about Prof. Ben. Please, we're going to be coming back to you. There's connection issues with Prof. But Prof, can we move on with the Unitary Decentralized form of government that has been instituted in Cameroon since? My question to you: you talked about the accelerated decentralization. Has it moved administration closer to the people since?
Yes, of course. One decentralization, as Dr. Akih will attest to, when you effectively accelerate decentralization, and as it has happened in other countries, it gets closer to the people because the people feel it, they participate in it, and they have a sense of ownership and of a certain autonomy to act, to react, to create. This is what you see since 2019, where you see that elections took place, the regional councils have become operational, they are making decisions. So the situation since 2019 is more accelerated, it's much more real and effective than was the case before 2019. There are laws in place, the decentralization law, which was not there before 2019. And so we are seeing a new Cameroon which is effectively decentralized now, where the people in both the regions and the councils are feeling like they own the process and that the process is theirs, they can participate. Of course, they have challenges. Of course, there are difficulties. Of course, in every beginning, you have these issues every beginning is always full of anxiety, full of difficulties. We can't shy away from difficulties. But the fact that we have difficulties or we have anxieties does not make the process unreal. It is real because since 2019, when the process became accelerated, it is different. Are the people making decisions at the level of regions or not? They are. Do the people have the resources to make those decisions? They do have resources. Did the people have the power to vote for their regional councillors and to vote for their regional executives or not? They did, they used it, and those who are elected, the regional councillors and the regional executives, they are in place. But I wanted to make the point when I was shot concerning some of the statements that Dr. Akih made.
Okay.
He made a statement that the unitary state was not constitutional. I think that we have to be careful here. As I said, we are all patriots. We love our country. But we both come from the northwest and the southwest. We think that we owe our people a moral duty and to make them understand the system in which we are and to be able, with their understanding, to use the system with the knowledge they've got in order to make the most benefit out of it. The unitary system is constitutional, it is legal, and it is legitimate because it came out of a constitutionally engineered referendum. And that referendum took place in all the four corners of the country. So it cannot be seen to be unconstitutional, because if one accepts that assertion, what you're saying is that the people of Cameroon in 1972 did not respect the constitution. Whereas the constitution of 72, as he himself said, Dr. Akih earlier, Article 2 of the federal constitution of 61 permitted the people in their sovereignty to make any decision with regard to the future of the state. And they took the decision, even though there are those who argue that Article 47 of the federal constitution of 61 did not permit so. But Dr. Akih knows that in political science, whether it's in Cameroon or it doesn't matter where, and that includes the US, where he is, there is no constitution which is beyond amendment. Every constitution is open to amendment, and all constitutions in the world are amended as long as the constitution that is being amended carries the provision for such an amendment. And that was the case in 72. The 1961 Federal Constitution, in its Article 2, gave the people of Cameroon the full sovereign right and freedom to amend it and to chart the way forward. It didn't mean that the Article 47 was violated. No, it was not violated, because the spirit and the letter of Article 2, which precedes Article 47, allowed the people to make such a sovereign choice. And as you know, Dr. Akih, a referendum is the highest form of expression of sovereignty by a people. So you cannot say that the 61 Constitution or the Federation was violated, as I hear some people say, and that the unity state is not constitutional. Of course it is constitutional. And now that the unity state is at its decentralized state, and that decentralization is accelerated, it's still within the bounds of the constitution. You also mentioned about the CPDM party. You know, I try to shy away from talking as a militant of my party, and that is why I will not take it that you are talking as a militant of any political party, and you know we have more than 330 in Cameroon. So I rather say we'll talk about the issues of our nation, because we are all builders of the nation. And I believe that
we have issues actually with the network, be it the normal or yes, Prof. Ewane.
Please, I'm on.
Yeah.
Yes, am I?
Yes, you're on, Prof. Go on.
Okay, so I'm saying that I try to avoid this idea of talking as if we are all talking because we are militants of one party or not. Me, I consider that Dr. Akih is a builder of the Cameroonian nation. I consider myself and other Cameroonians as builders, as long as we all believe in the nation, as long as we all believe in making that nation a shining city on a hill, a better place. So rather, the CPDM party is also an association. It's an association like all the other associations. The Republican Party in the U.S. is an association. The Democratic Party in the U.S. is an association. As all political parties are in the world. And their raison d'etre, their objective is to build a nation and not to destroy the nation. So as far as the CPDM is concerned, the CPDM is for building the nation. The CPDM joins all the patriotic forces to build a nation. And so the CPDM is not against the nation. In fact, the CPDM is a patriotic organization or political party that also wants to build a nation. But I want to make this point, since it's a conversation, a Republican conversation. You know, in political science, and this is American political science I'm talking about, because this is where we're all educated. We all belonged to as members when we were students, members of the American Political Science Association. I'm from the University of Denver, Graduate School of International Studies, which is now referred to as the Cobell Institute, which is the alma mater of Dr. Condoleezza Rice and Mrs. Albright, Madeleine Albright, may her soul rest in peace, who passed away a few weeks ago. So, you know, we were all taught by the Americans that, you know, every system of government, every political system has its advantages and its disadvantages. And it depends on what the people want, as long as what the people want is based on the laws, the consent of everybody, and that the Constitution permits so. The fact that we moved from a federal system after 11 years to a unitary system does not constitute a violation of the federal system and does not make the unitary system unconstitutional. Neither does not make Cameroon still a federation. Cameroon is no more a federation and has not been a federation since May 20th, 1972. Under the constitution, under the laws, and based on the referendum of 1972. Now, is it that some people are not, is it that everybody is for it? Of course, we know that everybody is not for it because we are a free nation. Sovereignty does not mean that we all agree on everything. What it means is that if we don't agree on everything as a republic, through conversations like this, we will understand each other, we will learn from each other, and we will build together. Actually, in a decentralized system, unitary system, the people have a certain degree of autonomy to make decisions. And the people have certain powers, or what is referred to in Cameroon as competencies and means, in order to be able to make decisions with regard to their local development, whether at the level of the region or at the level of the councils. But the same goes for a federal system. You know, I mean, as a political scientist and who was a former political science student in the US, we know that the American Federation is actually a decentralized system because federation is a kind of decentralization. And the difference between federation and a decentralized unitary system is that in a federation, the powers between the federal structure or the federal powers and the peripheral, which in this case the states and the local councils, are powers which are based on the constitution, and those powers are clearly in the constitution, which are that the powers are either concurrent, or the powers are shared, or the powers are reserved. So you have in the US Federation shared powers, reserved powers, and concurrent powers, and I think they even have delegated powers.
Okay.
But in the case of a unitary system which is decentralized, the powers of the peripheral regions or the local councils are powers that are delegated. But in each case, whether the powers are delegated like in a unitary system or are reserved or shared or concurrent like in a federal system, they are all degrees of autonomy. Autonomy by people in the periphery, meaning in the regions or in the states or in the local council, to make decisions about local development.
Prof, is that not where the problem is? On paper, it is said that powers are supposed to be given down to the regions and divisions, subdivisions. You describe it as accelerated decentralization, but many persons are yet to feel it. Are you saying that today the people of littoral region, through the implementation of the regional councils, can feel administration closer to them? The people of the northwest and southwest regions equally can feel so with the special status as well as those in the center, east, and other regions?
Yes, you know, I mean, the process of acceleration of the decentralization of the unitary system is actually new because it began only, what, 2-3 years ago. We are, I think, in our third year. So, you know, we are all in a learning curve. We are all learners. We should all be humble and honest and open to learn. You know, it is good that we are moving forward towards more autonomy and greater freedoms for the peoples in the various peripheries. So in the northwest or in the southwest or in the littoral or in the west or wherever, we should all be happy that we are moving towards a system of government and governance whereby the people in the peripheries feel more and more like they own something, and like they have certain powers or certain competencies. I mean, the word competencies, I think it's not necessarily Anglo-Saxon, but they have certain powers or certain advantages that will enable them to make decisions concerning their local government. But we are in the learning phase because it's new. There are a lot of things we will not do right.
Okay.
There are a lot of things we need to educate ourselves on. There's a lot of self-education and political training we need to, and management training that we need to bring into this. And we should not shy. We'll be shy. We should not feel discouraged. We should know that we are on a learning curve, but we should keep talking. That is why I'm one of those who believe that in order to achieve any system of government, it's all based on what does the law say, what does the Constitution say, and what do the people say. And how do you get the people to make a say? It is not by force. It is not by killing. It is not by insulting. It is not by kidnapping people. And I'm glad that Dr. Akih and myself share the view that we are against secession, we are against killings, we are against kidnappings, we are against violence, because that is not the way to achieve a desirable political system or system of government or governance that will be good for everybody. The best way is through consent, through consultation, through consultations, through referenda, through discussions, through dialogue. You keep on talking and you will get there. I mean, I take the example of the United States and Dr. Akih is in the US. I mean, as a student who studied under the American federal system, I know that the Americans did not believe they begin with a federation. They began as a confederation. And when they met in 1787 in Philadelphia, they met in order to make the confederation, to perfect the confederation. But it just simply occurred to them that when they got to Philadelphia in the summer of 1787, they decided that they better come up with a new system. And they came up with a federal system. And they have been perfecting that federal system for more than 200 years because they believe that they are not yet perfect. But the objective is to keep on perfecting it. And I think that this is the same way they began with 13 confederal or autonomous states. But now we know that they are 50 states, which are federal states, or federated states, I mean. It's fine as long as the people, as long as the law, and as long as the Constitution provides for that. But to revert to the contrary by insulting your way, violating everybody's right, killing everybody who disagrees with you, destroying everybody, preventing children from going to school, and violating the laws openly. Of course, we are not for that because I didn't learn that in the United States. I am a faithful and bona fide student of the American political science tradition. Okay. And I believe that what our professors taught us in American universities still holds for Cameroon, and we can use that knowledge, that savoir, and that savoir-faire to make our country a shining city on a hill, united in diversity and with good governance, and where everybody, no matter where they may be, northwest or southwest, or littoral or center or whatever, where everybody will feel like they belong, they own, and that they are free and autonomous enough to be able to make decisions that concern their local development. I think this is what we all want, and this
Prof,
is all,
Prof,
but we can only get it by talking to one another as we are talking.
Yes, let's get Ben Akih coming there. Prof has raised the issue of autonomy. How do we actually understand or define this? What if we had a unitary decentralized system or form of government that actually grants clear autonomy to the respective regions as they operate today? Would you still find a problem with that?
Yes, yes, for two reasons. One is the historical reason I've stated, that we started as a federation. Now, if it were somebody else just talking about this, that we should not question 1972, I would just move on and say, let us talk about the future. But we are talking with Professor Ngole, who is a political scientist, more expansive than political theorist. Thank you for the correction. But it is important for me to show where we differ, and that difference is very important. We are not going to agree about it, but we need to know where the other person is coming from. You're coming from the perspective that a constitutional process was followed, a referendum was followed, and the constitution was changed and it is legal. I subscribe to constitutional rule, and I'm not saying that because that question of the form of state was violated, the whole constitution is in question. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying with respect to the form of state, this Cameroon government is acting in bad faith with respect to the contract of our reunification. It is very clear, even if the Constitution gives sovereignty, as it should, to the people and allows them to exercise that sovereignty through elected representation or through a referendum, it is clear that there are still some basic rights which are protected by the Constitution. And that's why we are talking about a constitutional democracy and not just about a democracy. A democracy, you can vote on everything, but a constitutional democracy is going to limit certain questions about which you should not be voting, such as dividing the country and doing all sorts of things. There are certain key questions which touch the integrity, the territorial integrity and the unity of the country. These questions should not be touched. And it is that question, such as the nature of the federation, such as amendment of the Constitution through majority from each of the federated state. That's what Article 47.3 put out there. But Article 2 about the referendum, we can have referenda on all sorts of questions as far as these questions are not protected by the Constitution. And that's the virtue of the constitutional democracy. Now, of course, in Anglo-Saxon world, from which Professor Ngole comes, you call that a republic. But I am hesitant to call that a republic in the presence of my Francophone brothers and sisters, because their understanding of what it means to be a republican is completely flawed. Their republican means really the oppressive power of the executive. That is what it means in the Francophone world to talk about a republican, because they have very little value ascribed to the Constitution. We see proof of this in empirical study of political phenomena in Africa, where the Anglo-Saxon or the former colonies of Anglo-Protestant states are becoming more and more consolidated, stabilized, and prosperous than the countries of the Francophone region, where they attribute very limited power to the Constitution. They can change it when they want, they can remove term limits, they can put term limits, and I'm sorry, Professor Ngole, we're talking about the decentralized unitary state, which was effected in 1996, and we did not implement it until 2000. And you were in that party. Why is it that it takes more than 20 years to govern a country in accordance with what the Constitution says? This is where we have our problems. So it is a very critical question, even if we are going to say that let us forget about the past and look forward. But let us look forward with the understanding that our brothers in East Cameroon, led by the government there and by France in most cases, they attribute very limited value to the Constitution. One example is last week, I think a couple of days ago, Mr. Maurice Kamto, Professor Maurice Kamto, gave an interview for over 2 hours. He's talking about federalism, but not once, at least from my counting, not once did he mention the word Constitution. I mean, I would like to see Professor Ngole as a West Cameroonian promote this notion of the centrality of the Constitution as the law about how to make law and how to practice democracy. So now let us come to how we can actually make this federation be realized. It's good we are talking to each other, but we have to see the differences. I am a political activist with a particular agenda, federalism. I'm an activist. And a professor on the opposite side is a militant of the ruling party. So we have different rules to play. My role is to promote an idea to the population and make sure that the population embraces that idea. The role of Professor Ngole is to realize that the population is embracing a certain idea that is good for election, and his party should embrace that. So we can talk about the merits of decentralized unitary state and federalism. My question to the professor is simply this. If you think that the decentralized unitary state is working, is good, is going to deliver, are you happy to take this to the next presidential election as your political program and say, vote for CPDM, we will consolidate decentralized unitary state? If you are happy, then fine, you can do that. But I can only double my effort to talk to the Cameroonian people and say where we stand and where we came from. The thing that brought us together, the thing that can hold us together is a federal system. And the difference between the federal system is that the powers are not delegated. Mr. Leo, let me just finish this point. We are talking about if they give autonomy, just as the professor has described. When he describes it, it sounds very poetic. You can embrace it. You can almost accept it. If you are not careful about one particular word that he mentioned, delegated. The powers are delegated. Now, you can have a decentralized unitary state, almost like you have in the United Kingdom. In the Anglo-Protestant world, you can have a decentralized unitary state, and you will not know the difference between decentralized unitary state and federation. For example, in the United Kingdom, it's so decentralized to the point that the Scottish people have their own football team, and the English people have their own football team. Wales had their own football team, but they're one country. This is the extent to which people can come to an agreement. They don't even have a written constitution, but nobody has the crazy idea to violate the unwritten rules that keeps them together. So this is the Anglophone world where things work like this. But now if you come to the Francophone world, look at France. France says it's a decentralized unitary state, and look at Cameroon talking about that. The word is delegated. We want a federation where you know that the power I have as a local community, I have this power given to me by virtue of the Constitution, and that Constitution is the declaration of all the people of Cameroon exercising their sovereignty. That power, I am not going to say, we thank the head of state for the right to be able to organize election at our local level. This is unacceptable to the people of West Cameroon. They want to have local power given to them fully and protected forever by the Constitution, not dependent on who is the president delegating this power. And for example, so first you have the problem with the word that in a decentralized unitary state, the powers are delegated by the all-powerful president with plein pouvoir exercising haute instruction. And in the federation, you have powers which are given to you by the Constitution and cannot be taken by the president, no matter who that president is. But the second problem is that in delegating these powers, that decentralized unitary state has selected certain things and still gives us a senior divisional officer, and governor, and they are acting like colonial administrators in the time of French colonialism in Africa. That is unacceptable. But if the professor believes that this is the way forward, then I can only say let the CPDM party run with the decentralized unitary state as a political agenda in the next election. Okay. We would have failed in activism if we cannot bring the people to reject that program as a backward-looking program, which is not fit for the 21st century Cameroon.
Prof. Ben, thank you. We'll be coming back to you. Professor Elvis and Ngole, you listen to Prof. Ben actually explain what he has as far as the question that I put forward to him is concerned. But are we not also in the situation where we are because some persons have not respected the instructions handed down by the president of the republic, or respecting the spirit that is carried by the respective dispositions of the constitution that actually outlines how power is supposed to be devolved down to the communities?
Yes, you know, Mr. Leo, I understand the concerns of Dr. Akih, and I think as an activist, he has every right to hold on to the issues for which he's carrying out his activism. But I tell you, on the basis of federation, for those of us who studied under the American system and who studied political science from an American perspective, what we know is that the American Federation is a form of federation which we refer to as the classical form of federation. It's not like federations in other federations, let's say like India or Australia or Canada or something like that. There are different kinds of federations, and one of the concerns I have about those who stand for federation is that they tend to present it as if it is the solution to the problems of Cameroon, or it is the solutions to the problems of governance. I mean, there's no way in any political science book where I've ever read that a federal system or form of government or a federal state is the best solution as far as the governance of a political system or of a people. There's no such thing. There's no book which says that. The governance of a people or any society depends on the laws the people have put in place, the institutions the people have put in place, the people that the people have elected in order to animate the institutions, and the degree to which the people educate themselves about the issues of the day. This is what makes for good governance. So it is not that if you are federal, then you are better off than any other person. But here are the statistics. I mean, for the good of our audience, is that more than out of the 193 countries that make up the United Nations, there are only about less than 50 that are federal systems. Over 140, 45, or 147 are unitary systems. And that includes our former colonial tutor, which is Great Britain, as you know. I know that they have a kind of decentralization which is pretty highly devolved, very highly devolved. They call it devolution. They don't call it decentralization. Decentralization is more or less continental, which is used by people on the continent. The French, especially, the Italians have used it. The Spanish have used it. I think the Belgians have used it also. But it's all the same. The whole idea of decentralization is to give greater freedom, greater powers, greater autonomies to the people in the periphery. Whatever you call the periphery, you can call it states or landers or regions or provinces, that's no problem. The idea is that in terms of content, the people feel that they have the freedom and they have the autonomy, and that they can make decisions with the means of God as far as their local government, I mean local, meaning issues on the periphery are concerned, while the central structure, whether you call it a federal structure or the central unit, they operate on national issues such as security, foreign affairs and treaties, and so forth, commerce and so forth and so on. So we should not present a federation as if it is the answer to everything, because the greatest majority of countries in the world are not federal states. And there's a reason for that. That tells you that a federation is not the model that is the most predominant. The most predominant model of forms of state is a unitary system. But as a political scientist, I know that a unitary system performs best when it is decentralized. And when the unitary system is effectively decentralized, the people in the periphery enjoy and have almost the same advantages as if they were federations. That is why in political science, the process of decentralization effectively is referred to by some authors, by some political scientists, as the process of federalization. That is to say, you are moving in the same direction as if you were a federation, whereas in fact, you are not a federation. For example, if you look at the United Kingdom, I mean, the United Kingdom is not a federation, but the way that the devolution is, and it's looking more like it. In fact, in many cases, even one is tempted to think that it is a confederation, whereas the United Kingdom is not a confederation. A confederation is a system in which the peripheral states do not agree to come to one. So they remain in a loose association whereby they reserve, each of them reserves their sovereignty, meaning their money, their army, their institutions, their laws, their constitutions, and so forth and so on. That's what a confederation is. But in a federation, the peripheral states lose that sovereignty. They give the sovereignty to the national whole, in other words, to the federation, which is the same thing like in a decentralized unitary system, that the sovereignty is held at the national level on behalf of the people. But the decentralization therefore comes in order to give the people greater autonomy as far as their local issues or local development is concerned. And as in moving forward, as Dr. Akih just made mention of, different political parties will in their platforms or in their manifestos have whatever policies or ideologies they stand for. There's nothing wrong with that. What matters is that on election day, the people decide. So we have in the upcoming elections, I think the next presidential elections are in 2025. Okay, those who think, I know that in the last elections, presidential elections in 2018, those who had the federal agenda did not win. They lost very woefully. And the parties that were for federation, the MRC, the SDF and others, but they lost woefully. And the CPDM, which was for effective decentralization, won by almost 72% of the votes. So we will look forward to the next election. We are free people. We want to build our nation, and every political party is free. Every candidate is free to present their platforms or their programs and their manifestos. And we're all going to see. What is important is that we should not force it. We should not impose it on anybody. And worse still, we should not try to violate the human rights, the freedoms, the humanity of others by seeking to take away their lives, by killing them, by kidnapping them, by destroying them, and by torturing the little children instead of them going to school. And I know that you and I agree on that. That is wrong. And so we know that we can move forward when we understand each other. We can move forward when we are open enough for us to discuss if in the next election, whenever they take place, the people decide, and this, you take this from me, since you keep on referring to the CPDM, if in the next elections, in 2025, the political party that believes in federation or that believes in confederation or that believes in another form of some consociational arrangement, if it happens to win, that is the people's choice. We're all going to respect that because the Constitution guarantees the freedom of the people to make a choice. And because we are a republic means that we, the people, are sovereign and we are the ones who make the choice. But we make the choices according to the Constitution, according to the laws, and when the time comes to make the choice, either in a referendum or in an election. And so we think that we should be open enough and continue discussing. We have we try not to be discriminated or to be prejudiced. We believe that all of us in our ideas are making contributions, and we're making contributions that are intellectual. We're making contributions that are based on science. We're making contributions that are based on our common interest. Sure, as far as it is a democracy and in a republic, nobody can be guaranteed anything. But we have a duty, a common duty, to keep talking as you and I are talking. I appreciate you. You appreciate me. I appreciate your idea. I appreciate the fact that what you want. But as long as we know that there are certain things, there are certain red lines that you cannot cross, that I cannot cross. That is to say, we cannot impose it, we cannot force it, and we cannot violate the freedoms and the human dignities of one another simply because we want to put our points across.
Okay.
I mean, the folly and the tragedy of what is going on in the northwest and southwest should make all of us who come from these two regions very sad and very, very concerned, because it seems there are some people, and some of these people are in the diaspora with you, a diaspora which I shared for more than 12 years, who believe that those who do not agree with their stand should be killed or should be destroyed or should be should be eliminated or should be kidnapped and so forth and so on. Well, you know that this is wrong. Okay. There is no American political science, American ideology which will accept this.
Okay.
We hope that this conversation will help us understand that in moving forward, if the law provides and the Constitution provides for the form of government that the people will also support, as it is the case right now, let us go along with that, hoping that as time goes on, and as we keep talking and conversing and dialoguing, we will see where the future takes us. But we cannot assume that in a sort of messianic and a sort of I don't know what, a jungle way, we decide that, oh, he who doesn't believe in what you say, it is wrong. And you cannot at the same time decide that just because you disagree with the status quo or with what is established, you start referring to it as a coup d'etat, as a fraud, as illegal, as unconstitutional, because that's not the case. It's not the fact. You know, I like to tell people that let us look at the history books. The 1961 11th February plebiscite did not in any way, anywhere, because it was organized by the United Nations, did not in any way, anywhere talk about a federation or a confederation or a unitary state. It was simply a referendum that had a simple question: do you want to join? Do you want to be independent by joining? And it's good to have the full phrase: by joining the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which was sovereign and independent, or do you want to be independent by joining the Republic of Cameroon, which was already independent? That was all it was. Every other thing was an internal arrangement by the people concerned, that is, by the Republic of Cameroon at that time, and the then Southern Cameroon that voted to join their brothers of the Republic of Cameroon, and also the people of the Northern Cameroon who had voted to join the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Every other thing that went in between, federation, unitary states, were internal arrangements that were done according to the laws, according to the wishes of the people.
Okay.
Sure, not everybody agreed. I agree with you on that.
Okay.
But I agree with you. But we must know that everybody does not agree to everything.
Prof,
you know the example of the U.S. You are in the U.S. Everybody doesn't necessarily agree.
Prof,
but the fact that everybody does not agree does not make what the law has sanctioned or the Constitution has sanctioned wrong.
Okay.
The Constitution and the laws will always be right until they are changed in a constitutionally correct and legal manner.
Okay, Prof. Let's get Ben, who must have listened to you religiously coming here. Now, you have a problem with the federal structure that existed between 1961 to 1972, Ben, because according to you, it was a hyper-centralized federal structure.
I agree with him on that, by the way.
Okay, you agree with him? Yes, Ben, please. Now, how do you ensure that whatever form of federation that is going to come into play through a political party, because you agree that the only sure way of getting a federation in Cameroon is through the ballot box? You are calling on political parties to get their militants registered so that they can take the CPDM out of government and then impose this. But how do you ensure that it is not as centralized as was the case during the 1961-72 era?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Leo. I think the short answer is that we ourselves, we will make the Constitution. We will be part of the constitutional process.
Okay.
We know how the Constitution was drafted in 1961. It was drafted by a French expert. If you look across Francophone Africa, almost all the constitutions have the same language, the same turn of phrase, because those constitutions are drafted by the French government and given to the former colonies for a particular purpose. But I want to be clear. I don't want to mislead your viewers to believe that I subscribe to this romantic description of a very horrible situation we find ourselves in. That is the position that the government has taken, the position that this government has taken. There are people suffering, there are people dying, and some of these people are harassed, terrorized by the separatists. But we must not forget that there are also civilians who are killed by the government forces. There are atrocities which are committed by the government forces. So I take a stand in support of the rule of law to speak out against those forces in the government and against those separatists. And for that reason, that's why I'm advocating for a Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission in addition to the political solution. We need to understand that what we are trying to offer to the people of Cameroon, especially the people of West Cameroon, it's a measure to address a crisis. Professor Ngole would accept that even this decentralized unitary state is being implemented as a response to a conflict. And that conflict caused by two things. Caused, first of all, by the suppression of the Federation in 1972, which I maintain, and Dr. Munzu and others have maintained since the 1990s, that it was not done in accordance with the provisions of the document itself. Now, other people can have different ideas. Even in law, law always has an interpretive attitude to it. That is going to persist in the history of Cameroon, and I cannot forbid the people from the CPDM or from the government to say that the constitution was done in every order, but I will cite the very fact that to this day, our elections have a problem. The people don't believe that we can use politics to solve crucial issues like this. That is the challenge that we're trying to solve here. We have the challenge now to tell people that separation is unconstitutional, and I cannot do so without also recognizing that 1972 violated the provisions of that document itself. So let me come to the point. So first of all, so we need to understand that we are trying to solve a separatist problem which started as an indirect way to get to federalism. The point we're making is that separation is not an efficient indirect path to federalism, and federalism will never be a stepping stone to separation, because we believe in the power of the Constitution protecting a federation. Now, your question is, how do we ensure that the new federation that we achieve is not going to be a federation that looks like the federation from 1961 to 1972 that was not perfect? It was not perfect, but it was perfectible. And one of the ways that you could do so is to make sure that the constitutions are very clear in reducing the powers of the federal government in very critical areas, and making sure that we will move away from the prime minister. We will no longer have a prime minister of a federated state. We have a governor. That governor is elected. That's very clear. How did Augustin Ngomjoa leave the prime ministry of West Cameroon? He was removed by Ahidjo. That cannot happen in the new federation. And so we need to draft that new federation, federal constitution, taking into account all the weaknesses of this. And the other problem we had in that centralization, you had the inspector, federal inspector coming in and acting as the police, right? And afterward, we had gendarmes imposed on our people. This concept of gendarme does not exist in a system where civil liberties are protected by the Constitution. You don't need that barbarism in the state. You don't need that. You need the army, you need the police. That's all. So we have to find a way to make sure that the Constitution spells out the powers of the federated state, the powers of the federal government, and separate the power of the judiciary from the executive power. We cannot say our courts are independent. There is something we will not agree on with Professor Ngole. The idea that elections have been reflecting the will of the Cameroonian people. We cannot agree on that. Our position is to recognize that from The only very transparent election that has taken place in Cameroon was the plebiscite in 1961, which I do not question. So we cannot even talk about that. We are not here articulating a separatist idea. We respect the plebiscite of 1961 as binding. Our people of former Southern Cameroon became West Cameroon, and they made the choice very freely. But Ahidjo had 100% in 1965, 100% in 1970, got a plebiscite to 99.98%, and then 1975 had the same. 1980 had the same 100%. There is no country where the people are truly sovereign and free to exercise their will that elections give this kind of result. And that's why Mr. Paul Biya followed the same example. In 1984, 1988, he also had this 100% in his elections. So we have the very difficult task of telling our fellow West Cameroonians to say no to separation and to say yes to politics. But we cannot do that until we make it very, very clear that we are going to fight to make elections transparent. If elections are transparent, there is no party in Cameroon today that can boast of really going to the people and saying that vote for me, I will continue the unitary state in centralized or decentralized form, and the people will listen. We know that a federation has, first of all, a psychological response to the alienation of the people of West Cameroon. Secondly, it has a historical response and a constitutional response to the idea that there are certain principles that should be put in place. Now, if a government tries to play with the constitution to get a referendum, and the people are truly sovereign and free, and that's why in 1992 we believe that part of the reason they voted for Frundi was for him to bring back the federation. If Frundi had won, if Frundi had been allowed to go to the presidency through his victory, now Professor Ngole will refuse. He will say, Biya won in 1992. That's what their party says. But most of the people understood that Frundi's victory was stolen. Had Frundi's victory not been stolen, Cameroon would be a federation today, and there would be no SCNC, and there would be no Anglophone conflict. So some of these things are mixed in together, and we can only disentangle ourselves by committing to the principles of a constitutional democracy where elections are sacred and where amendments of the constitution are done carefully, understanding that certain things should not be amended because it's not a democracy. It's a constitutional democracy where from the founding of the entity, we exclude certain things from random vote and so on. So I hope that if we truly make our own constitution and not allow the French to write a document in Paris and send to us, we will be able to achieve exactly what our people want. The local government will have its power protected from the state government. The state government will have its power protected from the federal government, and we will have a whole set of areas where the federated state and the federal government cooperate to make sure that life is better for the Cameroonians. The more competition you have within the system, the more control you're going to have.
Okay, just coming very briefly, we have 5 more minutes to go.
Okay, I note first of all that Dr. Akih continues to use the terminology West Cameroon and Southern Cameroon. Let us be very frank and let us be helpful to our people. The phraseology or the terminology West Cameroon and Southern Cameroon cease to exist under constitutional law and in political science. It doesn't matter what country you use, and even history. That terminology ceased to exist as of 1972 with the referendum. And let us actually, not that everybody agrees, but we have to at least have a minimum of respect for the efforts people make. I mean, he just said there is no democracy. The best form of democracy is one that is bound by the Constitution. I agree that all democracy has to be constitutional as a base. Constitutional democracy is the way. And you cannot keep on using phrases or terminology which are totally out of the Constitution. Those two terminologies were thrown out in 1972. It's almost like Can you imagine Nigerians continuing to use the terminology Northern Cameroons? I mean, it will not be Nigeria. But don't forget that the former British Cameroons was both British Northern Cameroons and British Southern Cameroon. Why do we insist on what is past? We should not be victims of the past. So that's the first thing I want to say. The other thing I want to say is that Dr. Akih seems to pit separatism or secession and federalism as if they are opposites, that if you get federalism is the best way, according to him, to fight separatism. No, I don't think so. I don't think the solution to separatism or to secession is a federation. I don't think so, because we all know from the world that federations are not the solution to problems of secession, because we know federal system where there are problems of secession. I'm not going to call names here, but he knows and the world knows that even in federal systems in the world today, there are problems of secession that are going on. So federations cannot be a solution or a panacea to problems of secession. The other point I want to make is that he talked about federation, and he has talked about federation so much, and I believe he believes in it because he's an activist. But what he has not said here is what is the content that he gives, or the people who are federalists give to federation. Because federation, is it a federation? American federation began with 13 federated states, and we now know that there are 50. The Nigerian federation began with what? I think 3, it went to I don't know, 6 or 8, went to 19, now it's what? 36 or something. I'm asking, what is the content of the federalism that he is talking about? Because somehow we need to know what that is, because you cannot talk about something whose content people don't understand. And the last point I want to make is that he refers to elections as if he has an issue with election. Let me tell you, there is no Democrat under any constitutional democracy, or in fact under any constitution, particularly in a republic such as ours, because I don't want to talk about monarchical systems or theocracies. You know, in any political system which is under a constitutional democracy, the minimum you expect from the citizens is that they have to have faith. They have to have faith in the institutions, in the laws, until those institutions and laws are changed. We have had elections. I know there's an issue because there are those such as him who believe that, oh, they're not transparent enough. But again, the issue of transparency in elections is a world issue. It's not a Cameroonian issue necessarily. But what I know as a fact is that in the 1992 presidential elections, Mr. Frundi, whom I respect a lot, as I'm sure he himself knows, he failed in that election. And President Biya won that election. We all know the numbers. I think it was 39 to 36. In the 2018 election, we know that President Biya won the election by almost 72%, and the next person got only, I think it was 14, if I'm not mistaken, who was the MRC party. But what is strange is that the MRC party continues, unlike what Mr. Frundi did, continues to go about with the propaganda and the disorder of claiming that they were elected. They were elected by which law? MRC was elected by which constitution? It was proclaimed by which institution? Let us be serious. If we want democracy, particularly a constitutional democracy, we must believe in democracy. And democracy, there is no democracy without, that is meaningful, of course, without a constitution which is democratic. There is no democracy without laws. Anybody who wants to disrespect the constitution, anybody who wants to disrespect the laws, cannot call themselves a Democrat. Because once you proclaim yourself that you are a winner, when neither the constitution nor the law provide for that, or even have approved that, man, you are being an outcast. You are more or less a rebel. You are more or less a troublemaker. This is what I see since the 2018 election, and I hope that in conversations such as ours, because he mentioned about the interview of Mr. Kamto, Professor Kamto. Look, I don't know what lesson that Professor Kamto can teach us on federation. He's never lived in a federal system, and I don't know where he studied whether it was under a federal system. But whatever be the case, I don't think there's any federation or any federal system whereby some candidate would decide to arrogate to himself or to themselves and to declare themselves elected as president when in fact neither the law nor the constitution has approved of that. I hope that we will learn from this sort of conversation. We all want to move forward. I believe also in the rule of law. I believe in justice, of course. I believe in reconciliation, of course. But I also believe in dialogue, and I believe in respect for the law and faith in the institution and in the country. That is what I believe, and I believe that the American political science student that I continue to be demands of me and makes of me somebody bona fide enough to speak what I know and to speak my mind and to speak with everybody, because I believe that there are other political scientists in the world who listen to us. There are ambassadors here. And it's good that we all try to educate our people as a moral duty that we've got, so that we can move forward together and make our country a shining city on a hill, or a country with great promise. And we can do that without hurting anybody. We can do that without insulting anybody. We can do that by simply talking with one another. And we can do that by showing love for our country and respecting the laws and institutions until they are changed.
Thank you very much, Prof.
It's my pleasure.
Okay. We also want to say thank you to you, Ben, for taking part in today's edition of the program.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I thank Professor Ngole for taking the time to be part of the discussion. And of course, we have areas where we agree. Cameroon is our country, and we came together. We have formed this union. We need to try to make it work very well. Of course, we also have differences. We believe very strongly in federalism for historical, for constitutional, and for contemporary reasons in Cameroon. And if carefully, I used former Southern Cameroons, but I continue to use West Cameroon, supporting the idea that the referendum in 1972 did not meet certain requirements of the Constitution, and as such, I can maintain that position. One of the values of a constitutional democracy is what you end up saying that the institutions say should also tie in with the sovereignty, with what the people believe, what the people are saying. And until the people of people of Cameroon believe that their votes matter, that their votes are really counted, it will be difficult for us to make that change. And that is why I'm continuing to say that the way forward, where we are, whether you believe that Cameroon is a federation that is still illegally run as a unitary state, or you just believe that federation is the good way to go, the best way to test this idea out is to go out and register be ready for elections.
Thank you very much. We are out of time. Thank you to you. Thank you to you, Professor Elvis Ngole, and to all of you who took time off to watch this edition of the program. Stay blessed. Bye-bye.